So you want to own a cheese shop. You've stood in one? The case under glass? 40 wheels deep. Somebody in an apron carving a sliver off a wedge with the flat of a knife, handing it across, telling you the name of the valley it came from. You spent $19. You thought about that shop for a week afterward. And somewhere in that week, the thought arrived. I could do this. I know good cheese. I'm good with people. It's a small room in a cold case. How complicated can it be? Here's how complicated. You're about to buy a business where the inventory is alive, where it begins dying the day it arrives, where it gets physically lighter every hour you own it, so a pound you paid for Tuesday isn't a pound by Friday, where you can't sell the thing in the shape you bought it, so every sale needs a trained human with a knife, and where a phone call from a farm 4 states away can force you to empty your case into a dumpster and watch your shop's name land in a federal recall notice. That's before we talk about rent. The floor to get into this business is low, and that's the trap. You can start as a farmer's market table with a folding cooler and a few $1,000s of stock. People do it every weekend in every state. The ceiling is a Cincinnati grocery conglomerate writing a check. In 2017, Kroger bought Murray's Cheese, the Greenwich Village shop that had become the most famous cheese counter in America. The price for the business was never disclosed, but city property records showed Kroger paid $20.6 million just for the retail condominium units on Bleecker Street. That's the real estate, not the cheese, not the brand, the floor. Between the folding table and the $20 million floor sits a business governed by one mechanic that nobody puts in the pitch deck. And I want to name it now because everything else in this video hangs off it. Call it the rind tax. You buy cheese by the wheel, you sell it by the wedge. And the difference between the weight that arrives and the weight that leaves in customers' bags is money you already spent and will never see again. The rind you trim, the dried face off the exposed side, the ends too small to sell, the samples you hand across the counter all day, because sampling is the entire sales mechanism of this trade. And moisture, constantly, invisibly, leaving the cheese into the air of your case. Nobody publishes this number. Shops don't advertise it. But you can measure how much it matters by looking at what modern cheese shops have been forced to build around it. So today we're pricing this out properly. What it costs to open the doors. What the product takes from you before you sell a gram. Who made real money at this and how? Who ran a beloved shop for 53 years and still lost it. And the reason a business with margins this good still can't reliably pay a person a living. Let's start with the doors. The first number is the lease, and in this business, the lease is not a line item. It's the whole verdict. A cheese shop needs a specific kind of space. Retail frontage, because you live on foot traffic and impulse. Back of house for a walk-in, a cut-and-wrap station, and a sink configuration that satisfies your health department. And electrical service to run refrigeration continuously, forever. Because the moment your compressors stop, your inventory starts converting itself into garbage. That combination is exactly what every restaurant, coffee shop, and bakery in your city is also bidding for. You're competing against businesses with better margins than yours. Then the build-out. Refrigerated display cases run from under $2,000 for a small countertop unit to well past $20,000 for a full-service curved glass case. And you'll want more than one, because soft cheeses, hard cheeses, and cured meats don't want the same temperature or humidity. Add a walk-in cooler, shelving, lighting, a point-of-sale system, a slicer, and a scale certified for commercial weight. And add the plumbing you didn't know you needed. Kimi Saridon, who opened Life Love Cheese in Wakefield, Massachusetts at the end of 2024, wrote about spending weeks and real money with an architect before it occurred to her to ask whether the kitchen needed a produce sink. She'd assumed the architect knew the health code. He didn't. They got lucky. The plan was still on paper. That's the texture of this stage. Not one catastrophic expense. 100 small ones you discover in the wrong order. Then licensing. A retail food establishment permit. Food handler certification. A weights and measures inspection because the state cares very much that your scale is honest. General liability insurance. and product liability insurance, which matters more here than in almost any other retail category, for reasons we'll get to. Then inventory, which is where new owners misjudge badly because a cheese case has to look full to work. A half-empty case reads as a failing shop. So you buy depth you don't have customers for yet, and a meaningful share of that first order ages out before anyone asks for it. Realistically, a modest independent cheese shop in a mid-size American city taking a small existing retail space and doing a light build-out is looking at somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 to open the doors. Take a bigger space, build a proper kitchen, add a wine license, and you're past that quickly. Now here's the part that separates the ones who survive. You also need to be able to lose money for a year. Subscribe, because the next section is the one that actually kills people. Let's go back to the rind tax, because this is the engine of the whole business, and almost nobody outside the trade understands it. Every wheel in your case has a clock on it. The problem is they have different clocks. The hard-aged wheel wants time. It gets better sitting in your cooler. It also gets lighter because a natural rind cheese is still losing water, and that water loss is exactly what concentrates the flavor. So the thing improving your product is simultaneously shrinking the asset you bought by the pound. The soft cheese has the opposite problem. 2 or 3 weeks where it's perfect, with a hard wall on either side. Sell it early and it's chalky and the customer doesn't come back. Sell it late, and it smells like a cleaning product. Miss by 5 days and the crate is a write-off. Now, cut into it. The moment a knife touches a wheel, you've exposed a fresh face to the air, and it starts drying immediately, which puts the second half of the wheel on a much faster clock than the first. So inventory management here isn't a spreadsheet. It's rolling triage across 40 objects, each on its own timeline, most already opened. And everyone has to be cut by hand and wrapped by hand in specific paper by somebody who knows which cheese needs to breathe and which one needs to be sealed. Labor on every single transaction, product that loses weight while you own it, and a penalty for a slow week that isn't lower revenue. It's destroyed inventory. Look at what shops actually build to survive that. Tina Mooney, who opened the Fox and the Crow in Fort Collins, Colorado in 2014, put in tables and a small sandwich menu from day one. Her words to the Specialty Food Association: "Food floated the cheese shop for a very long time, until they had a base of customers who understood they were serious about cheese." And she's direct about what the boards are for. Cheese boards are where wheels that need to move go to be sold. That's the rind tax, solved by menu engineering. Amy Ruiz built Aperitivo in Grand Rapids, Michigan on the same logic. A cut-to-order counter and a wine bar, with a menu that began as one grilled sandwich made from whichever cheeses most needed a home. Now the margins, and why they look better than they are. Specialty retail runs on a doubling. Buy at 10, sell at 20, 50% gross margin, and that's the standard starting point in this category. But you're not doubling a stable object. You're doubling something that will shrink, dry, and partly become trim. So your real margin is the doubling, minus everything that never made it into a customer's bag, minus the labor of cutting every wedge by hand. And you're standing at the end of a long chain where every link has already taken its cut. The food writer Janet Fletcher laid the arithmetic out using illustrative numbers. A Gruyere lands at the port costing the importer $10 a pound. The distributor pays $12 and sells it to your shop for close to $16. You roughly double it. The customer pays about $32. Look at what you actually captured. $16 of gross, which has to cover rent, refrigeration running around the clock, a trained cheesemonger's wage, the paper, the insurance, the shrink, and the wheel in the back nobody wanted. And the farmer who milked the cows sits at the far end of that chain, taking the smallest slice of all. That's the normal case. Now here's the part you don't control at all. In the last few years, the landed cost of imported cheese has been rewritten repeatedly by trade policy. If a meaningful share of your case is European, your cost of goods is being set by people who've never heard of your shop. Quick timeline, because the whiplash is the point. In 2019, as retaliation in a long-running dispute over aircraft subsidies, the United States imposed tariffs of up to 25% on a long list of European goods. Cheese was on it: Gruyere, Comté, Stilton, Manchego, Parmigiano Reggiano. Prices moved almost overnight. In 2021, the two sides agreed to a truce and suspended them. Then in April 2025, a broad new regime hit European Union goods at around 20% and Switzerland at 31%. By that August, the Swiss rate had climbed to 39%, the steepest applied to any Western country. Fletcher ran the math on that same Gruyere. A $32 cheese becomes a $43 cheese. For a superb but unfamiliar wheel, that's the end of the sale. In November 2025, Switzerland negotiated back down to 15%. In February 2026, the Supreme Court struck down the legal basis for the country-specific tariffs. On July 1st of this year, the European Union deal took effect, capping most EU goods at a 15% ceiling. And within weeks, Brussels was back asking for carve-outs on a list that specifically named Roquefort and Pecorino. 5 significant changes in roughly 18 months. Your shelf tags are printed, your regulars know what things cost, and your distributor calls to say next month's container is landing at a different number than last month's. There's no version where you absorb it, because your rent and your compressors and your wages don't move when your cost of goods does. So you raise the price and watch a cheese stop selling, or you drop it and disappoint the 12 people who came in for it. That's the business. Now let's talk about the man who beat it. In 1991, a man in his early 40s moved to Greenwich Village with a failed New Jersey business behind him and a divorce behind that. He came from a family of grocers. His father had once asked him, with some scorn, whether a person could really make a living just selling cheese. He was standing in a small shop on Cornelia Street when he learned 2 things. The store, the oldest cheese store in New York, opened in 1940, had lost its lease, and the owner was thinking about going back to Italy. He bought it, moved it around the corner, widened it beyond cheese into imported foods, and then in 2004, he did the thing that changed the economics, which was to build temperature and humidity-controlled aging caves underneath the store. That matters more than it sounds. Affinage, the craft of finishing and maturing cheese, was barely practiced by American retailers then. Caves meant he was no longer just a reseller marking up someone else's finished wheel. He could buy young wheels from creameries, age them under his own conditions, and sell a cheese that existed nowhere else, and had no comparison price anywhere. He stopped competing on price. He started competing on something nobody could copy. The shop added a Grand Central location in 2002 and built a serious education program. In 2008, it began a partnership with Kroger, putting branded cheese counters inside supermarkets and training thousands of grocery employees to work them. That partnership reached 350 locations by the end of 2016. In February 2017, Kroger bought the whole thing. Today, there are well over 1,000 Murray's counters inside Kroger stores nationwide. His name is Rob Kaufelt, and I want to be precise about why he won, because it wasn't taste. He won by ceasing to be a shop. He became a supplier, an educator, and a brand a national grocery chain needed in order to look credible in a category it didn't understand. The counter was the proof of concept. The business was everything downstream of it. Most people can't execute that. What happens to everyone else is the rest of this video. If you're finding this useful, subscribing genuinely helps. Now the other side. On Hyperion Avenue in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, there was a shop called Say Cheese. It had been there since the early 70s. Glenn Harrell bought it in 1999 and ran the counter himself for a quarter century. The kind of proprietor who asks where you're going and who you're feeding before suggesting anything, then keeps you there 20 minutes talking about a rind. The business worked. That was never the issue. The lease was the issue. Harrell had been month to month since 2021, when new landlords offered him first refusal on an increase to $9,000, plus operating expenses, bringing the real monthly figure to roughly $12,000. His rent at the time was $3,950. He told the Los Angeles Times he knew the numbers, and Say Cheese could not support that rent. He'd known for years the landlord wanted a tenant who could pay more. He described it as waiting for the shoe to drop. In February 2025, the landlords told him they'd found one, a bread company. Say Cheese closed on April 23, 2025, after nearly 53 years. The easy read is gentrification. The useful read is narrower and more brutal. This wasn't a business that failed. It was a business whose landlord found a higher bid. And a cheese shop's margins cannot win a bidding war for its own address. Every extra dollar of rent comes out of the thin slice left after the distributor and the shrink and the wages. You don't own your location. You rent your permission to exist there. The second largest is something you can't see at all. In late 2016 and early 2017, people in Connecticut, Vermont, New York, and Florida began getting seriously ill with listeriosis. 8 were hospitalized. 2 died. 1 in Connecticut, 1 in Vermont. One of the sick was a newborn. Investigators traced it to a soft, washed-rind, raw milk cheese called Aulut, made by a small, respected creamery in Walton, New York. On March 7, 2017, Volto Creamery recalled 4 cheeses. 3 days later, it expanded the recall and eventually pulled everything it had ever made and destroyed its entire stock. Federal investigators found swabs at the facility had tested positive for listeria repeatedly, going back to the summer of 2014, and documented workers breaking curd with unwashed arms. A federal court shut the creamery down permanently. In 2024, the owner and the company each pleaded guilty to introducing adulterated food into interstate commerce. Prosecutors called it an entirely preventable tragedy. Now hold that next to a piece of American regulation. Since 1949, cheese made here from unpasteurized milk has been legal only if aged at least 60 days at no less than 35 degrees. The theory was that time, acidity, and salt would drive any pathogens below a dangerous level. That rule is older than the interstate highway system, and researchers have questioned it for decades. Studies have found E. coli surviving well past 60 days in Gouda and cheddar. A University of Wisconsin food safety researcher put it plainly. The rule made sense when it was written, but the threats changed and the tactics didn't. Here's why that's your problem as a retailer. You didn't make that cheese. You didn't swab that facility, but it was in your case and your customers bought it from your hands on your recommendation because they trusted your palate. When the recall goes out, your shop's name is in the local coverage, you destroy every wheel you're holding with no compensation, and you spend 6 months answering the same question from people who used to trust you. That's what product liability insurance is for. It's also why one uninsured shop can be ended by a supplier's failure it had no part in. The strangest thing about this trade is how much of it runs on nothing but somebody's word. In October 2024, Neil's Yard Dairy in London, one of the most respected names in artisan cheese anywhere, a company American shops buy from and model themselves on, handed over 950 wheels of cloth-bound cheddar, 22 metric tons, roughly $390,000 of Hafod, Westcombe, and Pitchfork. The buyer was a fraud posing as a wholesale distributor for a major French retailer. The paperwork was convincing enough that the cheese was on trucks and gone before anyone realized. Neil's Yard paid the 3 small farms in full anyway. Patrick Holden, who owns the farm where Hafod is made, said it might sound naive to be taken in, but that the artisan cheese world is one where a person's word is their bond. That isn't sentiment. It's a description of the operating system. No clearinghouse, no escrow, no verification layer. Wheels move on relationships and handshakes at trade shows, which is exactly why it works and exactly why it's exploitable. And a bank in northern Italy has accepted young wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano as loan collateral since 1953, aging them in vaults that have held 500,000 wheels at once, insured and collateralized like bullion. What's in your case is a real financial instrument. It just happens to be one that goes off. Now, the part that should sit uncomfortably. The reason there's affordable milk at the bottom of this chain is a workforce with very little leverage. The National Milk Producers Federation puts immigrant labor at roughly 51% of all dairy work in this country, and estimates that dairies employing immigrant workers produce close to 80% of the American milk supply. Dairy has no access to the main temporary agricultural visa program because that program is built for seasonal work, and cows need milking every day of the year. So a substantial share of that workforce has no legal pathway at all. The Federation's own modeling says that if it vanished, retail milk prices would roughly double. Read that as a business fact rather than a political one. The price structure your customers consider normal rests on a labor arrangement that would not survive being priced correctly, and the workforce inside your own four walls isn't doing much better. A cheesemonger here earns roughly $17 to $22 an hour, which lands most of them in the mid to high 30,000s. Meanwhile, the credential in this field, the American Cheese Society's Certified Cheese Professional Exam, is a 3-hour, 150-question test people study months to pass, sometimes hours a day for half a year. The society doesn't release pass rates, so the person behind your counter has studied like it's a bar exam, can speak with real authority about milk chemistry and aging and regional appellation, and earns less than a first-year assistant manager at a chain drugstore. That's not an accusation aimed at owners. It's structural. They can't pay more because the margin isn't there, and the margin isn't there for every reason we've already covered, which is why every cheese shop eventually reaches the same fork. 3 ways through, and all of them are real. Option 1. Stay a cheese shop and be excellent at exactly that. The Wasik family has run Wasik's Cheese Shop in Wellesley, Massachusetts for over 4 decades, and they've tried most of the add-ons and dropped nearly all of them. Brian Wasik tells the story of his father hitting his limit with customers, asking for no mayo, extra mustard, and announcing that they were not a sandwich shop. They were a cheese shop. They don't chase board business either, despite demand, because boards eat too much labor. His reasoning is the sharpest sentence in this trade. The more you're off the counter, the less you're with customers. Option 2. Become a hybrid and let food carry the cheese. Sandwiches, soup, a wine bar, boards. Higher revenue per square foot, a second day part, and the waste problem partly solved by turning aging wheels into menu items. You've also just become a restaurant, with a restaurant's labor model and a restaurant's failure rate. Option 3. Sell knowledge instead of only weight. Russell Feltz built a classroom into Beautiful Rind in Chicago and teaches most of the sessions himself. His read on why classes work is smart. People are intimidated at a cheese counter, but in a class, it's socially acceptable not to know things. Some nights, his busiest hour is 8 to 9 at night, when the class lets out and everybody buys. And because his mongers double as servers and earn tips, he's had almost no turnover. That last part is the quiet one. In most retail, turnover is an inconvenience. Here, your entire premium is one trained person's credibility. Lose them, and you're a refrigerated room with expensive dairy in it. Which brings us to the thing your competition is doing right now that hands you your best argument. In 2016, following a Food and Drug Administration investigation, it emerged that a Pennsylvania company called Castle Cheese had been selling product labeled 100% grated Parmesan that, according to the agency, contained no Parmesan at all. Instead, a blend of Swiss, mozzarella, white cheddar, and cellulose. Cellulose is a legal anti-caking agent at low levels and isn't dangerous. The fraud was the label and the quantity. Bloomberg commissioned lab testing of store-brand grated Parmesans and found several well above the permitted level. The company went bankrupt. Its president pleaded guilty, and a major hard Italian cheese executive estimated that around 20% of such cheese on American shelves was mislabeled. That is your entire pitch, and you should use it, not price. You will never win on price. Your pitch is that you can name the farm, name the affineur, say what the animals ate and what month the milk came from, and cut it in front of them from a wheel they can see. Every scandal in industrial dairy is an argument for a counter with a knowledgeable person behind it. All right, numbers. Scenario 1. A modest shop in a decent neighborhood in a mid-size American city. $150,000 to open, part savings and part debt. Retail only, no kitchen. Gross margin around 50% on paper, closer to 40% after shrink, trim, and samples. If year one goes well, you pay yourself a modest salary and nothing more. If it goes badly, you pay yourself nothing and cover the shortfall personally. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Data isn't gentle here. Roughly half of new establishments are gone within 5 years, about 2/3 within 10. Scenario 2. You add food, sandwiches at lunch, boards in the evening, wine if your state and your budget allow it. Revenue per square foot climbs. Waste drops, because every aging wheel now has somewhere to go. Labor jumps, your hours get longer, and you have a kitchen to staff and inspect. This is the version that most reliably survives. It's also the version where you stop spending your day doing the thing you opened the shop to do. Scenario 3. You go up the chain instead of sideways. Build aging space. Buy young wheels and finish them yourself. Teach. Put your name on something that exists nowhere else and therefore has no comparison price. That's the Kaufelt path. The only one with a real ceiling on it, and it takes a decade, capital, and an appetite most people who love cheese counters don't have. And then the fourth scenario, which is what usually happens. You run a genuinely good shop. You build a real clientele. People bring their parents in when they visit. You're profitable enough to keep going and never profitable enough to build a cushion. Then something arrives from outside. A lease renewal, a tariff schedule, a recall, and you find out how little room there was between working and gone. The Cheese Shop of Salem in Massachusetts closed on September 5th, 2025, exactly 10 years to the day after it opened. The owners were plain about why. Rising costs, tightening margins, and they said they could have kept going if they'd been willing to cut wages and benefits. They weren't. That's not a failure story. But look at the shape of the choice. Pay people less or close. Those were the doors. So here's the honest summary. The inventory is perishable, gets lighter while you hold it, and can't be sold in the form it arrives in. Every transaction needs skilled labor. The recall risk isn't yours to control, and neither is the cost of goods. It can't outbid a bakery for its own lease or pay its most skilled people what their expertise is worth. And the one thing that makes it survive, a specific person behind a specific counter who can be trusted, is the single asset that can walk out the door. By any conventional measure, this is a bad business. Americans now eat around 40 pounds of cheese per person per year. In 1982, that number was under 20, and most of that growth has gone to industrial product on supermarket shelves at a price no independent shop can approach. And still, in every American city, someone is signing a lease this month because the thing sold at a cheese counter was never really cheese. It's the 20 minutes, a person handing you something off the end of a knife and telling you where it came from, and you believing them. In a food system where almost nothing else invites you to. Somebody who read the label so you didn't have to. Somebody standing between you and the 20% of hard Italian cheese that isn't what it says it is. That's the product. The dairy is the delivery mechanism. You can buy into it. $150,000 to open. A year of paying yourself nothing. A landlord holding all the leverage. A certification you'll study 6 months for and still not know if you passed until the letter comes. And one phone call on some ordinary Tuesday telling you to empty the case. That's the actual price of the room you stood in on vacation. Next time, we're doing the wine shop next door, because it looks like the same business with better shelf life, and the numbers say something very different.